You may be thinking now that Trump is a populist. You are right. He didn't accept the 2020 elections, and he should have. So should Hillary in 2016, so should Brussels, and so should Westminster in 2016, and so too should Congresswoman Pelosi, instead of saying the 2016 election was, quote, hijacked. Quote, hijacked. Thank you.
Nancy Pelosi gets humiliated at an Oxford debate by a banjo player, no less, who stood up and faithfully defended the worldwide populist revolt in the face of one of the most corrupt politicians on the planet. I'm Dr. Steve, your Patriot Professor, and we're going to get a front row seat for one of the most brutal takedowns of Pelosi yet. So make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let's dive right in. So if you don't know, Winston Marshall, the former banjoist for the band Mumford & Sons, faced off with Nancy Pelosi at the Oxford Student Union debate on whether populism was a threat to democracy. And let's just say Pelosi was totally out of her league.
To me, populism is not a dirty word. Since the 2008 crash, and specifically the $1 trillion Wall Street bailout, we are in the populist age. And for good reason. The elites have failed. Populism, as you know, is the politics of the ordinary people against an elite. Populism is not a threat to democracy. Populism is democracy. And why else have universal suffrage if not to keep elites in check?
All right, so there's so much good there. You'll notice that Winston said that since 2008, we are in what he called the populist age. And he's right. Even the left-wing Guardian is admitting that. We are living in the midst of a rising populist revolt, and he did a very good job in defining populism. The key characteristic of populism is a distinctly vertical political antagonism as opposed to a horizontal one. So instead of polarizing politics horizontally, right, seeing the political animus as between left versus right or liberal versus conservative, this horizontal antagonism gets reconfigured vertically. Now the animus is between the people versus the political class, the ruled versus the rulers, the ordinary American, right, versus the oligarchy. And so ironically, far from being opposed to democracy, populism, as Winston rightly pointed out, is democracy. It's the literal outworking of the rule of the demos, the people, as opposed to a corrupt oligarchical elite like Nancy Pelosi.
Given the success of Trump, and more recently Javier Milei taking a chainsaw to the state behemoth of Argentina's bureaucratic monster, you'd be mistaken for thinking this was a right-wing populist age. But that would be ignoring Occupy Wall Street. That would be ignoring Jeremy Corbyn's for the many, not the few. That would be ignoring Bernie against the billionaires, RFK Jr. against Big Pharma, and more recently, George Galloway against his better judgment. Now, all of them, including Galloway, recognize genuine concerns of ordinary people being otherwise ignored by the establishment. I'm actually rather surprised that our esteemed opposition, Congressman Pelosi, is on that side of the motion. I thought the left was supposed to be anti-elite. I thought the left was supposed to be anti-establishment. Today, particularly in America, the globalist left have become the establishment. I suppose for Ms. Pelosi to have taken this side of the motion, she'd be arguing herself out of a job.
That was good. And again, he's absolutely right from two vantage points here. First, you'll notice because populism is more of a structuring of politics, of reconfiguring politics away from a horizontal animus and more around a vertical divide, the people versus the elite. Populism transcends the traditional left versus right binary. So that's why you have populists of both political stripes, populists on the left, populists on the right, because they both share a common enemy, the corrupt elite. Populists have the unique capacity to unite in a way the traditional left and right simply couldn't, given their horizontal animosity. But you'll notice something else he pointed out there, and that's how the establishment left is now an intrinsic part of the aristocratic elite. It's part of a social order that Joel Kotkin of Chapman University profoundly describes as re-feudalization. It's a term that refers to the ways in which the structure of our society is increasingly reflecting the kind of caste system that characterized the feudal Middle Ages. So, for example, today, like then, you have an astonishing concentration of wealth and power in the hands of very, very few. So 5 years ago, 400 billionaires owned half the world's assets. But today, that number's dropped to just 100 billionaires. But next to that, we're seeing today the rise of a comparable kind of religious fundamentalism. But of course, the fundamentalism we see today is the insidious form of what's technically referred to as cultural socialism, what we more commonly refer to as wokeness. And like with all forms of religious fundamentalism, the key characteristic of wokeness is the total and complete intolerance of any and all forms of dissent. Dissenters are heretics, and heretics must by definition be excommunicated, hence the role of cancel culture. So Winston is absolutely right. The far left are now the ruling elites who use their power and affluence to protect their privileged position in this new corrupt caste system. And by the way, we now know how we can actually use their corruption against them. You know that Nancy Pelosi and her ilk have been getting insider trading secrets for decades now, enabling them to beat the market every single year. But thanks to a little-known SEC database, guess what? We can have access to those very same trading secrets that these politicians are privy to. We get to see what stocks corporate CEOs are buying up in real time, and then we get to piggyback on their trades to gain the same advantage for ourselves that Pelosi and the crooks in D.C. have. My friend Ross Givens has been tracking insider trading for years now, and his recommendations have led to investment returns of over 200%. Some have hit as high as nearly 1,500%. And now it's your turn. Click on that link below right now and learn how you too can learn to trade like Pelosi. Click on that link and learn how to gain an insider advantage for yourself today.
The Hong Konger populist revolt is literally called the pro-democracy movement. The farmer revolts from Netherlands to Germany, France, Greece to Sri Lanka. Farmers are taking their tractors to the road to protest ESG policy that's floated down to us from those all-knowing, infallible elites of Davos. The trucker movement in Canada became anti-elitist when petty tyrant Prime Minister Justin Trudeau froze their bank accounts, not the behavior of a democratic head of state. The Gilets jaunes in France, ULEZ in London, working people protesting policy that hurt them. And how are they treated? They're called conspiracy theorists. They're called far right by the mayor as well. Ladies and gentlemen, populism is the voice of the voiceless. The real threat to democracy is from the elites. Now, don't get me wrong. We need elites. If President Biden has shown us anything, we need someone to run the countries. When the president has severe dementia, it's not just America that crumbles, the whole world burns. But let's examine the elites. European corporations spend over 1 billion euros a year lobbying Brussels. US corporations spend over $2 billion a year lobbying in DC. 2/3 of Congress receive funding from pharmaceutical companies. Pfizer alone spent $11 million in 2021. They made over $10 billion in profit. No wonder then that 66% of Americans think the economy is rigged against them for the rich and the powerful. And by the way, we used to have a word for when big business and big government were in cahoots. And I think any students here of early 20th century Italian history know what I'm talking about.
All right, that that was absolutely brilliant. Okay, this whole notion that populism is somehow anti-democratic is the very definition of projection. It's the very definition of projecting onto others the very sins that the corrupt elite are themselves committing. In fact, what Winston is spelling out there for us is a billionaire bureaucrat alliance that is in point of fact producing what British scholar Colin Crouch calls post-democratic sentiments. In other words, we still have elections, we still have campaigns, debates, and the like, but no one really believes in it anymore. The vast majority of the population no longer trusts the so-called democratic system or its institutions because no matter how they vote, nothing ever changes. The elites always seem to get everything they want, and the will of the people always ends up dismissed and derided. That's what's called post-democracy sentiment, and it's every bit a product of the rule of our current elite.
Let me read you some mainstream media headlines. The New Yorker, the day before the 2016 election. The case against democracy. The Washington Post, the day after the election. The problem with our government is democracy. The LA Times, June 2017. The British election is a reminder of the perils of too much democracy. Vox, June 2017. The two eminent political scientists say the problem with democracy is voters. New York Times, June 2017. The problem with participatory democracy is the participants. Mainstream media elites are part of a class who don't just disdain populism, they disdain the people. If the Democrats had put half their energy into delivering for the people, Trump wouldn't even have a chance in 2024. He shouldn't have a chance. You've had power for 4 years. From the fabricated Steele dossier to trying to take him off the ballot in both Maine and Colorado, the Democrats are the anti-Democrat party. All we need now is the Republicans to come out as the pro-monarchist party. Ladies and gentlemen, populism is not a threat to democracy, but I'll tell you what is. It's elites ordering social media to censor political opponents. It's police shutting down dissenters, be it anti-monarchists in this country or gender-critical voices here, or last week in Brussels, the National Conservative movement. I'll tell you what is a threat to democracy. It's Brussels, DC, Westminster, the mainstream media, big tech, big pharma, corporate collusion, and the Davos cronies. The threat to democracy comes from those who write off ordinary people as deplorable. The threat to democracy comes from those who smear working people as racists. The threat to democracy comes from those who write off working people as populists. And I'll say one last thing. This populist age can be brought to an end at the snap of a finger. All that needs to be done is for elites to start listening to, respecting, and, God forbid, working for ordinary people. Thank you.
An absolutely brilliant defense of populism as the very soul of democracy, coming from Winston Marshall at the expense of one of the most anti-democratic of elites, Nancy Pelosi. Well done, Winston. Well done. Here's your opportunity to tell big tech tyrants where they can stick it. Click on that link below and download our brand new cancel-proof Turley Talks app, and you can sign our special declaration of restoration. That's our petition to big tech that declares a new day is dawned. They are no longer in control, and we are taking our nation back. We've already got over 1,000 signatures of courageous patriots, and yours is next. Click on that link below or go to fight.turleytalks.com right now.